When you flip through the pages of history, you come across these characters whom you remember for what they were. For example, Yuri Gagarin, the first man in space, Einstein, a scientific genius, or Joan of Arc, the French equivalent of the Rani of Jhansi from India. But then again, you have characters who are so many things at the same time. And even as you begin to speak about somebody of Shubhas Chandra Bose's caliber, who was a rebel, revolutionary, freedom fighter, a man of great intellect, a man of his words and actions, a James Bond in flesh and blood. I mean, if Shubhas Chandra Bose does not fit the bill, I don't know who else would. I didn't want to work on this project on a prefixed notion that this is how he led his life and this is what he was. So what I wanted to do was kind of speak to people randomly in the streets and find out what kind of a conception do people carry in their heads about Netaji so many years after he left for his heavenly abode. So in the course of this video, what I did was I went out, interviewed people randomly from different strata, from different communities, and this is what they had to say. দাদা, নেতাজি নিয়ে আপনার কি ধারণা?
নেতাজি আমাদের দেশের একজন আর কি মহান বিপ্লবী। নেতাজি সম্বন্ধে প্রথমে যা বলার দরকার সেটা হচ্ছে এখনকার প্রজন্মে নেতাজি সম্বন্ধে আমার মনে হয় না খুব ভালোভাবে সব কিছু জানে।
কিন্তু সত্যি আমাদের একটু মানে খারাপ লাগে এখন নেতাজিকে নিয়ে যতটা মানে চর্চা হওয়ার কথা সেরকমভাবে কিন্তু চর্চিত হচ্ছে না, কারণ নেতাজি আমাদের দেশের জন্য অনেক কিছুই করেছেন এবং তার অন্তর্ধান যে রহস্য সেটা এখনো আমাদের অজানা।
So what I discovered was this, that essentially people will tell you either one of the two things, that he was a freedom fighter who gave his life for the country, or they will talk about the lingering mystery of his death, and they will talk about the Mukherjee Commission and how there are papers that have yet to be declassified, and so on and so forth. So there seems to be a great deal of preoccupation about, it seems that people are preoccupied about the manner of his death, when I feel that there is so much we can learn about his life, the manner of his life, and the kind of man that he was in person. Some time ago, I watched a movie which was based on the life of one of America's deadliest military snipers, Chris Kyle. And I remember a scene from that movie where a father is telling his sons that essentially there are three types of people in the world. You have the sheep, you have the wolves, and then you have the sheepdog, the protectors or the leaders. And when you look at Bose's life, from an early age, he had this tendency to stand up for the rights of the oppressed. I recall an incident when he was a student in Presidency College in Calcutta. One of his professors was disparaging the Indian students in class, and Bose apparently manhandled the professor, for which he was promptly expelled from the institution. And so he had to graduate from another institution, which is Scottish Church College, also from Calcutta. After that, he went to Europe, and he promised his father that he would sit for the Indian Civil Service exams, which he did. And not only that, he also secured the 4th rank in that very examination, which was quite a remarkable achievement even by today's standards, because considering the fact that this exam was something that was held not in India but in London, so one would have to travel all the way to Great Britain, to London, to sit for the exam and compete against mostly white candidates. Now, after making it to the topmost rung of the administrative hierarchy, Bose decided to resign from his civil services job. And I think in doing this, he sent a very strong message to the British that when it came to one's individual capabilities, the Indians were certainly at par, if not better, than the British counterparts. And insofar as a matter of choice was concerned, we would rather be our own rulers instead of being quisling administrators for the British or any foreign power for that matter. And I think for a young man like Shubhas Chandra Bose, that was a remarkable sacrifice. When the war broke out in 1939, and I'm talking about the Second World War, Bose decided to advocate mass civil disobedience to protest against Lord Linlithgow's decision to involve India in the war for the British cause. And because of this, he was imprisoned and later released and then put under house arrest for several days. This would be in the year 1940. So this is the point when things really start to heat up and you have the cloak and dagger affairs starting from this point onwards. Bose decided to seek foreign help. A colleague and friend of mine helped me to put this in perspective. So what do you make of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose's connections with Germany and his relationship with the German political leadership?
আসলে নেতাজি সুভাষচন্দ্র বসু এটি একটি নাম নয়, এটি আসলে সমগ্র ভারতবাসীর অন্তরাত্মা। 1941 সনে 17ই জানুয়ারি তো ব্রিটিশ সরকার তাকে তখন সেই মুহূর্তে গৃহবন্দী করে রাখে, কারণ ব্রিটিশ সরকার মনে করেছিল যে সুভাষচন্দ্র বসু তাদের জন্য বিপদ ডেকে আনতে পারেন। তো তাদের আশঙ্কাটাই যে এমনভাবে সত্যি হয়ে যাবে সেটা হয়তো তারাও ভাবেননি। তো 1941 সনের 17ই জানুয়ারি তিনি ব্রিটিশ সরকারের চোখে ধুলো দিয়ে তিনি ভারতবর্ষ সীমানা পার করে তিনি আফগানিস্তানে যান, মূলত কাবুলে আর কি, আফগানিস্তানের কাবুলে যান। তো সেখানে তিনি কিছুদিন থেকে সেখানে তার এক সাগরেদের সহায়তায় তিনি সেখান থেকে যান রাশিয়া। তো রাশিয়ায় তিনি কিছুদিন থেকে তিনি সেখান থেকে যান জার্মানি। প্রথমে একটা জিনিস আমি জানিয়ে দিতে চাই যে সুভাষচন্দ্র বসুর মূল উদ্দেশ্য একটাই ছিল, সেটা হচ্ছে দেশকে স্বাধীন করা। তো তিনি ভালোভাবেই জানতেন যে দেশকে স্বাধীন করতে হলে জার্মানি ও জাপান সে তৎকালীন সময়ে এই দুটো কিন্তু সাম্রাজ্যবাদী শক্তি ছিল। তো তারা যেমনই হোক না কেন সুভাষ বসুর মূল উদ্দেশ্য একটাই ছিল যে তাদের সঙ্গে বন্ধুত্ব করে তাদের সহায়তাটা লাভ করা।
So what Bose did was he grew a beard to look like an Afghan gentleman, and from under the very noses of the CID guards and policemen who had been positioned outside his residence in Kolkata, he made his escape. So he traveled all the way to Peshawar in present-day Pakistan with the help of agents from the German intelligence agency Dabwa. And from Peshawar, he assumed the disguise of a deaf and dumb tribesman because he couldn't speak a word of Pushtu, which is the common medium of communication in Afghanistan. And from Kabul, he traveled all the way to Moscow in Russia. Now, this is an incredible journey, considering the fact that Afghanistan even today is one of the most dangerous places to travel in. So the distance from Kolkata to Kabul itself is over 4,000 kilometers. When you add the distance from Kabul to Moscow, that's an additional almost 5,000 kilometers. So he possibly traveled a distance of over 9,000 kilometers from Calcutta all the way to Moscow, which is more than the circumference of the planet Pluto. Amongst the many dangers Bose must have faced in that epic journey, something that was unknown to him was the fact that all along, one of his Indian followers, somebody who was traveling with him all along from Calcutta to Kabul, was actually a communist sympathizer, a certain gentleman by the name of Bhagat Ram Talwar, who was not only working for the Russians, but simultaneously he sold information to the Germans, to the Italians, to the British, and even later on to the Japanese. So when Bose reached Moscow, he was a little disheartened to find that the Russians were not as sympathetic as they should have been. And now, with the help of his German friends again, he traveled all the way to Rome, and from Rome he was flown to Berlin in Germany, where he decided to establish an Indian legion, which is known as the Indisch Legion, or the 950th Indian Infantry Regiment of the German Army. So now, this is very interesting because we have ex-British Indian Army soldiers of Indian ethnicity now who have sworn their allegiance for the Germans and who have declared Bose as Netaji, their leader, and were united for the cause of India's independence from the British. And ironically, it is not in India but in Germany that these Indian soldiers, ex-POWs from the war in Africa, captured by the Germans, who named Shubhas Chandra Bose Netaji. One of the problems that, and challenges I'd rather say, that a filmmaker faces when talking about and kind of retelling the story of Bose is that the story has so many dimensions, so many things happening simultaneously at the same time. So while Bose was setting up the Indisch Legion in Germany, in British India, the British already knew what he was up to, that he was collaborating with the Germans, thanks in no small measure to the Judas Iscariot, Mr. Bhagat Ram Talwar. The rest, of course, is history. We know that towards the latter half of the war, Germany was engrossed in a campaign of self-defense for her very survival. And Bose realized that he had more of a chance of taking a successful shot at India's freedom if he collaborated now with the Japanese in Southeast Asia. So sometime in 1942, he boarded a German submarine, a German U-boat, which took him to some place off the coast of Madagascar in the Indian Ocean, from where he was transferred to a Japanese submarine, which took him to Japan. The Japanese were more accommodating than the Russians or the Germans.
1月7日、自由インド仮政府主犯スバス・チャンドラ・ボース氏は空路ビルマに到着。日本と共にアジア解放の戦いに駒を進めるバーモー・ボースの両巨頭故最前線ビルマに相対して今や戦局の切り替え必勝攻勢の時至る。
And in 1942, he established the Azad Hind Fauj, also known as the Indian National Army. Now, this army, once again, comprised mostly of captured Indian soldiers from the British Indian Army who had been captured by the Japanese as prisoners of war in the Southeast Asian campaign. And to be precise, on 4th July 1943, Bose assumed the leadership of the INA, where he famously said that, "Give me blood and I'll give you freedom." The Japanese, of course, lost the war, and so did the Italians and the Germans, but that is beside the point. What I was more interested to know was this. Ma'am, to what extent do you think Netaji was instrumental in India's struggle for freedom?
Actually, Shubhas Chandra Bose is my hero. I admire him most. And I'll tell Shubhas Chandra Bose, often held as one of the iconic Indian leaders. His patriotism, his call for freedom, his obdurate refusal to stop before achieving the goal made him hero. Not only this, he always believed that freedom can be gained, especially the Indian freedom can be gained only with the support of the foreign country. After escaping from India, he went to Russia, and after that he went to Germany to get the support. Actually, he didn't get the support from Russia. And Hitler welcomed him and supported him by giving him the high power radio facility so that he could connect with the countrymen. And he used to give his fiery speeches through the radio station of Berlin. And first line in Bengali, he used to say, "Ami Shubhash bolchi." That provoked and encouraged the people of India, instigated the people of India. He urged his countrymen to fight, to rise into the revolt against the British tyranny. Though there are many differences in the ideologies and the method of struggle between him and Gandhiji, but Gandhiji appreciated him, loved him like anything, and he referred Shubhas Chandra Bose as the prince among all patriots. His death and its cause might still remain shrouded in mystery, but he had shone like a star in the dark skies of fettered India, bringing hope of freedom that no other had done. Still, we can hear his battle cry, his fervent call to the countryman, "Give me blood, I'll give you freedom. Delhi chalo." And his battle cry to the Azad Hind Fauj, "India is calling, blood is calling to blood. There's no time to lose."
Hope. I like the sound of that word, hope. And no matter how transient it is, often enough it is enough to push an individual through hard times. And Subhash Chandra Bose's voice came as a voice of hope to the countless millions of his countrymen and women. So at the end of the infamous Red Fort trials, where captured members of the Indian National Army were tried for treason, but were let off scot-free because of immense public pressure, simultaneous mutinies broke out in the British Indian Army, Navy and Air Force. And I think that badly shook the confidence of the British in their Indian armed forces, because the memories of the 1857 revolt were still fresh on their minds. And I think it was a major factor behind why the British quit India. Research, commissions, classified papers, I think these things will continue to weave their charm around the personality of Subhash Chandra Bose and the ensuing mysteries that we relate to his life and death. But one thing is for certain, that Bose achieved what he had set out to achieve. Nothing more or nothing less than the freedom of India.
अब चाहे जिए अब चाहे मरे, जो होना है वो